So perfect gems can be pretty easy to get. I mean, flawless gems fall everywhere, even in Nightmare, and then obviously all through Hell. And then you can cube those up to perfect gems. Now, even though they fall pretty frequently, they can actually be incredibly valuable and incredibly useful to you and a lot of other people. And I want to prove that to you today right here in this video, because we are going over all of the best uses for perfect gems. Make sure you catch each one of these tips because they can lead you to some incredibly easy wealth.
Number 1.
Now, the number one thing we'll talk about here is probably the most overlooked, but it's also the most obvious. Early on in the game is when you're usually going to be doing this, not really late game, but you can actually just plug them into specific socketed items to help your characters out. Let's say early on you do end up magically getting yourself like a perfect ruby. That can be a bunch of life to add to your character, life to stick on something you put on your mercenary, or to add damage into a weapon that you have. The same thing goes with any of them, whether you're adding poison damage from the emerald, the cold damage from the sapphire, or if you're adding mana from the sapphire. I know a lot of people can struggle early on to get their Colossus Bulge Insight equipped on their mercenary. Well, there's actually an easy way around that. Grab an armor and slam on some perfect amethyst and bam, you get a bunch of strength and then you can use it. So while endgame and getting you incredibly wealthy, this particular way isn't going to do. Don't sleep on early on. Plug in some of those gems in where needed to get your character where you need to go.
Number 2.
Up next here, we're going with crafting. Now, most of the crafting recipes really aren't that great, but some of them can actually end up being like best in slot. The most specific one that everybody wants for all their casters is those crafted caster amulets. So you're going to want to save up those perfect amethysts in order to get this stuff. Some other ones that get used a lot early on are things like maybe caster boots, and one that a lot of people sleep on, but I end up using quite often, is at least making yourself one caster belt to get FCR on that particular slot. Now, blood rings amulets used with those rubies when making these crafted items are also sought after, but not nearly as much as the caster ones, because casters in this game, let's just be honest, they reign supreme.
Number 3.
Now, you're using those amethysts and those rubies for crafting blood and caster amulets and rings and things of those natures. Now, what do you do with all the rest of the stuff? You can actually re-roll any type of magic item in the game. Now, you don't want to waste these perfect gems on just anything. Most of the time, people will be re-rolling grand charms in order to get skillers that also have preferably life on it, but a lot of other stats as well. If you want to go for the ultimate end game, best in slot for down in the skiller grand charms, you want to re-roll either Baal, Diablo, or Neolithic grand charms. Now, these are high enough item level that they can actually get up to 45 to life on top of the skiller, when a normal skiller from, like, we'll say Hell difficulty can only get up to 40. This won't necessarily boost your character up a ton more, that extra 5 life, but it is worth astronomically more on the trade market.
Number 4.
Now, number 4 and 5 kind of work together here, so you're going to want to make sure you pay close attention to this. Number 4 right here is getting value actually from items that really aren't all that spectacularly great. Now, if you're trying to get things like up into the Ist runes, the Gull runes, and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to trade things like Natalia's boots, like Immortal King's Maul, and things of those nature for any of those type of runes. Even if you give a whole bunch of Immortal King's pieces, even if you lump a ton of these items together, people aren't going to want all these giant items to be traded for, we'll say, their Ist rune or anything like that. But what you can do is take those not so great items, but newer people kind of want them to use them because they're upgrades for them, and they have no problem giving you 3, 4, 5, 6 perfect gems for those items. And really, honestly, what are you going to do with these items? Let them all sit on a mule and rot, or are you just going to toss them out and let them poof? Well, what you can do is, we'll say, trade that Immortal King's Maul for 5 perfect gems, and then go ahead and save up those perfect gems you get from trading these mat items, and then trade 40 perfect gems for an Ist rune. And you don't have to go sit in trade games forever either. When you're out there magic finding, let's say you're running Andariel, let's say you go down and kill Andariel and she drops Immortal King's piece, the boots, we'll say. The next game you make, just say Immortal King's boots for 5 perfect gems. And then you go out and do your magic finding. Maybe you'll even find another item that you can trade that way. And in the meantime, while you're out there magic finding, hopefully someone sees your game, jumps in. Why not I just give you a few perfect gems and get a little upgrade at the boot slot? So I already know what's coming. Phil, you can't actually get these perfect gems for these garbage items that nobody wants. I already know it's coming. I already know it is. So here I recorded a few different trades I had done in the past where I traded. Right here is just a lum rune. Now, it takes 3 lum runes just to make 1 co, and then 3 co's to cube these up to something that's worth this 10 perfect gems I got right here. You would take a ton of lum runes, so that really was not worth a whole lot. Here's another trade where I found another pair of Lying of Hands. So what? Let's get rid of these Lying of Hands. I actually got 6 perfect amethysts for these Lying of Hands, so you can really get these perfect gems for these items that are okay but not really valuable at all.
Number 5.
And now we'll slide right into number 5 because I essentially mentioned it a couple times in number 4, and that is trading these perfect gems away in order to get the things that you actually want. Now, after you save up a lot of these perfect gems, you can trade those for, like I said, the 40 perfect gems for an Istrune, if that's still the current value on that. And then you can take like that Istrune and maybe trade it for a Shaco, depending on the value. This is all value dependent on the time and ladder when you're making the trade, but that's the general idea. Now tell me, wouldn't you gladly trade 3 Immortal King's Mauls and 2 Grizz Armors and Natalia's Boots for a Shaco? I would, but nobody would ever accept that deal, but they would accept 40 perfect gems for an ist that you could then easily trade for that Shaco. Now do remember, perfect rubies are worth more than the topazes, diamonds, and sapphires and emeralds, but the amethyst is the most valuable of all the gems, so make sure you set those, at least the amethysts aside, and perhaps even the rubies, and trade those separately, because you can definitely get more value for those.
Number 6.
Now the final one I'll mention here is we'll call other cube recipes. Now there's a lot of little things that you can then do with perfect gems, such as upgrading weapons and armors to give them more defense or more damage, taking a low level item and then possibly making it incredibly useful even for your end game characters. Another example here is you need certain perfect gems in order to roll in the Herodic Cube to try to get sockets on particular items. So I generally will keep around a couple of each perfect gem just in case one of these Herodic Cube recipes come up that I want to use. I'm not going to go through every single one that is useful or that would add value to your items, but I'm going to go ahead and put a link down in the description to a website that will show you all the different Herodic Cube recipes that you might need these perfect gems for. So now I hope you see, do not sleep on these perfect gems. They can add some incredible value to your characters when used right. Mega shout out to the channel members and the patrons. You really are the supporters of this channel. You really are the sponsors that make it possible for me to keep streaming and making videos, so I am eternally grateful to all y'all. Peace out, everybody, and don't forget, keep slaying.